Welcome to Beyond Talking Points from Little Visionaries Bookstore. I'm Bridgitte Jackson-Buckley, and today I'm speaking with DJ Lee. DJ is a writer, teacher, and Regents professor in the English department at Washington State University, and the author of Remote, Finding Home in the Bitterroots. Welcome, DJ.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm honored to be here.
I am excited to be here with you. Okay, so for those who don't know, what are the Bitterroots, DJ?
The Bitterroots are a mountain range in the northern Rocky Mountains, and they actually run from the kind of southern Idaho, more like the middle of Idaho, all the way up to the Canadian border. They straddle the Idaho-Montana border. So if you're in Montana, you can access them. If you're in Idaho, you can access them. And they're extremely rugged. And by that, I mean steep mountain peaks, granite river valleys, lots and lots of forests, thick forests, and not very many people and a lot of animals.
Wow, wow. Well, I had never heard of the Bitterroots until I read your book, and I'm just going to hold it up because I have it right here with me. Finding Home in the Bitterroots by DJ Lee. I love this cover. So you have emphasis in the title on the words in the. Can you talk about your title? Remote, Finding Home in the Bitterroots.
Yeah, the reason that I first went into the Bitterroots is because my grandmother, whom I was very close to, she gave me on her deathbed a box full of mysterious items. And after she passed, I opened the box and everything in the box pointed to the Bitterroot Mountains, which I had hardly even heard of. I mean, I may have heard it once or twice in my childhood, but there were certain things my grandmother didn't talk about. She had some serious mental health issues. She had some issues with her husband, my grandfather, whom I never knew because he died when I was born. So a lot of unanswered questions started to pop up in my head as I was going through the box. And I felt like my grandmother was leading me to this place. And that this place was a very strange kind of home because it felt so hostile to survive there. And so it was really the idea of finding home. It really was a journey. It was a search to feel at home in this place and to figure out what a lot of these items pointed to the fact that my grandmother and grandfather had lived in this place for many years before my mother was born. And so just finding out the family history, but also once I got in there, trying to absorb the natural history and the human history, going back to indigenous peoples who lived there for, since time immemorial. So it was finding all kinds of different homes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a wonderful explanation of that, DJ. I was curious about that. So your grandmother Esther and your grandfather lived in it, and where they lived was very remote. It was
Yeah.
very isolated. And so you're saying you didn't know very much about it. So it was okay. So she left you a box with memorabilia, we could say, to point you to go find out more about their life, even though it wasn't discussed very much.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's interesting, but yet obviously she wanted to share that part of her life with you because she left this box of memorabilia for you.
Yeah. And at first I was a little disturbed because, like I said, she and I were really close. I looked to her as almost, well, kind of a totem figure, but also a maternal figure. And the fact that she kind of hid that stuff from me her whole life was a little shocking. But there were a lot of, that was sort of how she was. She would say, I don't want to talk about it. Like some things would come up and she would just like shut it down, which we know for that generation. I mean, she was born at like 1905 or something, that was a tactic that they used, and many of us still do that, right? We just want to avoid
Absolutely.
stuff that's painful. And I
Yeah.
don't blame her, but at first I was shocked that here was this life that I knew nothing about and this place I knew nothing about.
Mhm.
And
But that seems, I mean, that just makes me think that seems okay. So there is the element of mental illness that you
yeah.
spoke of, but that there are these unspoken aspects of our lives. Yeah,
Mhm.
because there's parts of my life that my children don't know about, but my children think they know everything there is about me. And every now and then I'll
Yeah.
say, your mom and dad have some secrets, things you don't know. But yeah, of course
Right.
there will be some aspects that are
Mhm.
just difficult to talk about. But when you said that, it made me think of the part I read about in the book. Yeah, there was this beautiful aspect of being out in the wilderness and in the remote, and
Mhm.
you found like this beautiful footage of their life there. But it also seemed that there was a part of her that wanted to
Mhm.
come out of that, if I understood it correctly,
To come out
to
of
come out
what?
of the wilderness.
Yeah, she had a
Yeah,
very mixed relationship,
yeah.
sort of mixed emotions, because she came from a huge family of 13 children and she
Hmm.
was isolated back there. And
Yeah.
even today, because it's a protected wilderness, and because even if it weren't, it's so hard to access and build, there are no roads back there, but if there were, it'd be very difficult to build them. And so it's the human contact is few and far between. And then
Mhm.
she and my grandfather apparently had a very distant, cold marriage, and so I think she was extremely lonely back
Lonely.
there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Lonely.
But getting to the idea of secrets, one thing that has occurred to me after I wrote the book is that yes, we hide parts about ourselves or events from even from our children or our closest kin, but I wonder also about what we hide from ourselves, and that we don't even know, like what
Yeah.
we're not even aware of. And I think my journey through that place, which took 15 years to kind of piece it all together, I think that I uncovered some things about my grandparents, that maybe, and my grandmother, that maybe she didn't even know about herself.
Yeah.
And one
Yeah.
of those was that she did actually love it back there.
So she had some ambivalence, but
Yes,
she loved it.
I believe she did, even
Mhm.
though towards the end of her life, she said she did not, and she hated it
Okay.
there. But
Okay.
yeah.
And so it's so 15 years of travel and research as chronicled in your book Remote, and you're
Mhm.
flying out over the Bitterroots, the Selway Bitterroots it's called, with Dick
Yeah.
in the airplane, and you get to see all
Yeah.
these beautiful, this just a beautiful landscape.
Mhm.
So you write that there's still so much that we don't know about the wild. So of
Mhm.
course you were piecing together your family's history
Mhm.
and discovering
Mhm.
things about yourself. But what else would you like to know about the wilderness?
Well, I've always been fascinated by Peter Matheson, The Snow Leopard. I don't know if you know that book.
No.
It's kind of like a classic in nature writing and spiritual writing linked with nature, but that book is about him trying to, partly about him and this journey to try to see the snow leopard in Nepal. And the snow leopard is rare, and it's shy, and people hardly ever see it. And so he goes into this whole thing about how there are things that exists in these huge wild landscapes that we humans don't know about. Like there may be
Mm,
species, there may be animals, there may be plants, there may be even, you know, things that we just can't imagine. And I am really intrigued by that idea. And I think anytime you're out in one of these vast wild landscapes, and by that, I just mean that humans haven't settled them, right? They haven't built
yes.
roads and houses, and they don't live there and have hospitals and grocery stores and stuff. That you can imagine that humans don't know everything there is to know about the earth, that there are things in those dark forests and those high peaks and those deep waters that we just don't know. And that's a really, I mean, you think that might be a scary thought, but it's that idea that the self starts to shrink, and then
Mm,
the world around you gets expansive, and so then kind of time starts to feel expansive, and even though the self is shrinking, it just feels more natural for us to be in that small mysterious place. So I don't know if I really want to know everything about that place, but I like that it evokes that.
yeah, okay, wow. I mean, it's elusive,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, that is just so interesting. And you what you just spoke of is on an expansive, much larger scale.
Hmm.
And I felt that when I read your book, like this world, and I think I wrote that in your review, that this
Yeah.
world, the wilderness, is so foreign to me. And while reading it, I was thinking, gosh, like, we live our lives and there is so much that we don't know. I mean, especially like if you stay in a routine, if you stay
Mhm.
in the same area, you do the same things. But I've traveled to some places, I've moved around a little bit, but
Mhm.
the wilderness, it was like a completely different world. I mean, when I read the part in your book about the salmon, that like 5 foot long salmon, I was like, I can't believe I've lived all these years in my life and I have never heard of that or seen that. So it was just amazing, like the unrestrained animals that you write about, like how nature is so uninhibited, and the
Yeah.
delicate and complex histories that you talk about with your grandmother and grandfather. I found your writing so interesting, and then it made me wonder, how do you feel when you're in nature? I know you said you don't know that you want to know everything, but how do you feel when you're in a natural environment?
Well, that's a great question, Bridget, because I actually had the opportunity to go back to the Selway Bitterroots about a month ago. My parents, who are in their 80s, still go back there, although we didn't backpack. We drove to a camping spot right on the edge of the wilderness, and we spent, I think it was Memorial Day, we spent 3 or 4 days there. And the your life compresses to basic needs, like what am I going to eat, where am I going to get my water, how am I going to cook it, I'm sleeping on the ground, is there a rock in the middle of my back, or like how far do I have to move so that I can have a flat place. Just very simple, where am I going to go to the bathroom,
Yeah.
very, very simple, in the present moment, bodily, and site specific, embodied moments. And then you're out there for, say, 3 or 4 days, but it's when you come back and you get, like you say, into your routine, you get back on your screen, because there's no Wi-Fi out there, so
Mhm.
your screens are useless really, unless you're just taking photos. But you get back and you carry with you that sense of expansiveness, of sleeping on the earth, of dirt under your fingernails and you don't care, you know, you don't have to have a shower for 5 days. It's like the dirtier you get, the cleaner you get inside. And so you carry that with you for about, my theory is that for every day that you're out there, you carry that sense of presence, that sense of the larger animate earth with you for 2 days. For every one day you're out there, you carry it with you into the front country for 2 days. So I was there for 3 days. So for an entire week, I had that feeling. And it's this clarity that's hard to express, but it gives you this mental acuity that you know what decisions to make. Your mind doesn't spin in circles. You the little irritable things that happen, the thinking ahead, oh, I need to plan this, I need to do that, I should have done that, that's gone away. It's just for mental health and mental clarity, it's amazing. It's the best pill
So,
ever.
so you are, I mean, deeply rooted in the present moment
Mm-hmm.
when you're in nature, it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like.
Yeah.
So are any other senses heightened for you? Okay, so you have clarity. Do you
Mm-hmm.
feel more intuitive? Do you notice the colors more or anything else going on? It just because it just seems like nature,
Mm-hmm.
and to be in amongst the
Mm-hmm.
trees, like
Mm-hmm.
there's power in that.
Oh
There's
yeah.
wisdom and life
Yeah.
in that, and there's no
Mhm.
way that we're not going to physiologically be affected by that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and you can say that like where I'm living in the suburb of Chicago right now, there's trees all around and that energy is there, but what's not there in the wilderness are all the buildings and the technology and the screens and the
Mhm.
connected to these lives that are elsewhere, that kind of take us elsewhere. I do often have the experience when I'm in the wilderness, and this can be anywhere like Utah, Alaska, Greenland, ice, you know, anywhere in the world, Chile, um, where you are able to focus on the most minute thing, like a delicate spider web, uh, you know, hanging from a branch. And the next minute you look out and there's this huge grand vista, mountain upon mountain, clouds, the rushing sound of rushing water. So um, and there's a sense of wonder in both of those. You know, you
Okay.
might think a spider web is like a very not unusual thing. We see them all the time everywhere, but in that environment, the smallness of that delicate little web against that grand vista evokes this sense of wonder because it's like unusual, and you notice it in a way that you wouldn't notice it if you were you know, dusting off your windowsill or something.
Yeah. But I like that, an evocation of wonder. It made me think of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
I
And
love that book. Yeah.
yeah, and how, uh, when you approach something with a beginner's mind, it's almost childlike and exploratory. You're
Mm-hmm.
coming to it knowing that you don't know everything that there is to be
Yeah.
known.
Yes. And we need, you know, that child's mind, that
Yeah.
beginner's mind is so important for happiness and health. But it's interesting because in our world we're discouraged from having
Hmm.
that mind. We're supposed to
Hmm.
be expert and knowledgeable and not admit that we don't know things.
I like that aspect, the exploratory mind of also being
Mhm.
curious.
Yes, that's right.
As
Yeah.
over the past couple of years, like I have really, brought curiosity to the forefront of my life. Follow your curiosity and
Hmm.
see where it leads you. And
Hmm.
that is one of the ways that, you know, with the bookstore that I'm able to find just these fascinating stories and wonderful authors, just sometimes it's the story, sometimes it's the book cover. Like I love your book cover,
Oh,
you
thank you.
know.
Yeah,
And
I love
I
it.
know I found your book through the Women's National Book Association, but
Yeah.
I love it. And I was just so curious
Mhm.
um, about it. And I like the way you have, like, I don't know if they can see this image. It's like a
Yeah.
faint image.
Mhm.
And your daughter did this beautiful video that you have on YouTube. It was the book trailer for your book where she
Right.
juxtaposed
Mhm.
these present day images of the wilderness,
Mhm.
correct, with
Mhm.
archival footage that Esther gave you or you
Well,
found
my grandfather had taken them, and
your grandfather.
my
Okay.
mom sent them to me, right? Yeah. And my
Mhm.
daughter's, so she was able to do this. Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
okay, so you do explore beyond the
Mhm.
wilderness. I mean,
Mhm.
clearly you are someone that has a sense of adventure.
Yeah.
And on your
Yeah.
website, you write for an article in Slime Redemption for About Place Journal. In
Mhm.
October 2017, I became a mariner.
Mhm.
I set sail from Longyearbyen,
You got it. Good one.
Svalbard,
Right.
10
Yeah.
degrees from the North Pole on board the Antigua.
Mhm.
So I think I have the photo here for Svalbard. I'll pull
Okay.
that up and you
Sure.
can just tell us because this is
Mhm.
just stunning. Where is
Yeah,
it?
it is a stunning place.
Is this it? Can you see that?
I can't see. Oh, yes, yes, yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
that one, yeah.
Is this where you were in 2017?
Yeah, I was invited, well, I applied and I was accepted to a artist residency in the international territory of Svalbard, which is like 10 degrees from the North Pole. And we sailed on a huge ship that was, it's outfitted to be a traditional barkentine sailboat like they would use in the 19th century. And there were 28 other artists and writers on there. And every day we would go out in these little, those are called zodiacs, these little inner tube like boats.
Oh,
And
wow.
we would go ashore. We actually didn't go onto that glacier. Obviously, we couldn't get too close because they're calving and that's very dangerous. That's actually pretty far away from that glacier. It doesn't look like it in the photo, but yeah, but we did all these art projects on different shores on different islands in that archipelago there. And
Mhm.
it was a fabulous, yeah, a life-changing experience. And I met so many good friends there too, people who are still friends.
I mean, that is just, that's a lot to take in for the naked eye and to just process mentally the magnitude of a glacier, you know,
Mhm.
and just the power of I don't know, just what we have here on the earth. Like what's that?
Yeah,
Not what's here for our disposal and just for our
right.
use, but just what we're living amongst.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. And it is sort of like what we were talking about earlier, like we're living amongst these beautiful creatures. Some of the Inuit that have talked to researchers do think of glaciers as living beings that actually have feelings and emotions and get
Mhm.
angry and stuff.
Really?
So we're living among these beings, either known like glaciers or unknown like the Peter Matheson thing. And yeah, it's again, it's that feeling of wonder, like that can kind of pull us out of our routine and our usual ways of seeing the world. And it's just like really kind of change your perspective and cause you to grow, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so I like the connection that you make between Neowise
Oh,
and other formations such as the lily hookbreen off the west coast of Svalbard and the
yeah.
concept of shedding ice. So can
Hmm.
you talk about that? Like what this connection? Well, I made the connection
Yeah.
But, well, no, you made the connection between the two. But can you talk about like the shedding ice and what your thoughts are about that? Because you went to you and your husband drove like 90 miles to see Mealwise. And then
Yeah,
you started thinking
right.
about the Svalbard
Well,
glacier.
because the reason we can see the comet is because it's shedding ice, I believe. And so that's
Okay.
what creates the tail. But comet scientists also are able to study comets to sort of get this early history of the solar system. And geologists and climatologists drill ice cores to get an early um,
Oh,
history
yeah.
of the planet, right?
Right. Mhm.
And the so it just got me thinking that there's a connection between these things. I mean, it's kind of tenuous. It has to do with what ice can show us and tell us. And everyone who goes on that Arctic Circle artist residency becomes obsessed with snow and ice, which might be hard for you to think about in California. But the beauty, but also it's a record. It's a historical record. And with comets, it's a record of, the early solar system, and which is so interesting because it's like, I mean, that it gets at that question of why are we here? What's our purpose?
Right.
Uh, and we can actually study that through these rocks jetting through the atmosphere. But with glaciers, they drill down and they can get a sense of what the early atmosphere of the earth was. So it's a younger history that they're getting, but still much longer than our short 100 years or less that we're on earth.
Yeah. Okay, so the Selway Bitterroots, Svalbard, the glaciers, driving to look at comets. How do you tie all this into writing with the English department?
Well, I'm glad we got to that idea of wonder, because that's how I tie it all together, really.
Wonder.
And
Okay.
wonder is a word that we throw around and people use it in book titles, and it sounds, very cool. But I'm also interested in the sort of deep contemplative wonder and the philosophical tradition behind wonder. Plato said that wonder is behind all philosophy, this idea of wonder. And philosophers have written about that is it an emotion, is it a feeling, is it a state of mind, is it a concept? Some scholars say that it's actually a family of meanings, but the philosopher Martin Heidegger in the early 20th century said that wonder wonder is vital to our humanity, and it's about unconcealing the truth about a thing.
Mm,
So it's about
I like that.
uncovering the thingness of whatever it is. And it's just about authenticity, which is kind of how we started what we were talking about right before we went online. And it's also, though, about the unusualness of the usual. So when you brought that photo up, it does look, and you said it's hard to process, it looks so strange. You see these usual elements, people, a boat, a mountain, but it gives you this sense of the unusual in the usual, and that surprise, that unexpected, is also an aspect of wonder. And so all of these experiences, the night sky,
Very
glaciers,
nice.
a delicate spider web, the way your cat looks at you in the morning. I mean, all of it can evoke that wonder that can actually change your perspective a little bit in a good way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, and so with regards to the natural world, that you clearly have a love for, are there any other books that have made a profound impact on you other than the one you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. Wow, that is a good question. There's so many.
Is
There's
there one that stands out? I know it's always hard to
It
choose.
would, I would say that the snow leopard
Okay.
was just so important to me and continues to be so important to me. Um, I'm sure as soon as we sign off, I'll think of tons and tons of them, but that's the one that comes to mind now. Yeah.
Okay, and you do so much because you, again, are a Regents professor, you're a writer, author, but you also, are you still doing work with the Black Earth Institute?
Yeah, right.
Okay, because you
Yeah.
guys did the Practices of Hope series over the
Mhm.
summer, live
Right.
reading series. What
Yeah.
else are you doing with the Black Earth Institute?
Well, this fall we'll hopefully, if it happens, we'll have a retreat, and it's kind of this artist collective get together and talk about our creative, and so there's it's also linked to some activism, social justice activism, and just where there's artists and writers, and how we can go forward. I think we're talking this fall in our retreat about unity.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. That's always an appropriate conversation to have. Okay, so my last question is for possibly some of the students in the age cohort that you work with,
Mhm.
maybe even a little older, who are very geared towards technology, and technology can be wonderful because we're speaking of
Mhm.
technology,
Oh
or
yeah, for sure.
technology. What
Mhm.
would you say to those who may not know the natural aspect of life that they may be missing or unaware of because so much of their attention is placed on the technical aspects of what we have available to us?
Yeah, I think, a kind of purist attitude is not helpful. Like, put your cell phone down, and put your boots on and let's go
Yeah.
for a week. I think that you can make time just in your backyard to have an experience with the natural world, whether it's, I mean, one thing I like to do is I take a little sketch pad and I go out just into my garden and I just draw some of the forms that I see without looking at my paper, just letting my mind, of just letting my sight and my hand feel into that being. Get so even taking 10 minutes to do
Mhm.
that, and then taking a photo of it and putting it on Instagram, whatever.
Yeah, there you
I mean,
go.
I think that you start to even just see the benefits of how freeing that can be, or going up to a tree when you're taking a walk on the sidewalk and just putting everything down, and putting your hands on the bark and feeling
Oh,
that,
yes.
skin to skin, your skin to their skin, limb to limb, your limbs to their limbs, even for 3 minutes. And those are practices that are, and I do this with my students.
Mhm.
They are required to take these little walks and trips, and they love it.
I
They
love
love
that. I love that. I love that suggestion. Like
it.
I
Yeah.
mentioned before we started, I subscribe to Witness and Wilderness, a monthly miscellany where you provide some of
Mhm.
these, what would you
Mhm.
call them? Like natural, artistic, short practices that you
Yeah,
can do to
exactly.
connect with nature.
Yeah, and that's the
I
whole
love
point
it.
of that publication. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. We hope you've enjoyed listening to this conversation with DJ Lee. Little Visionaries is an independent bookstore that, beyond selling books, hosts community focused interviews and author events. Remember, the best way to support your local independent bookstore and the community we serve is as simple as buying a book. DJ, a papermaker, bookmaker, and writer, thinks teaching and learning are humans' two great gifts, and that the most exquisite forms of communication happen in that little petri dish called the classroom. Whether the classroom is in a school, a field, a street, corner, a mountain, or a dream. And she can be reached at DebbieJLee.com, where you can read selected shorter works and sign up for Witness and Wilderness, a monthly miscellany. Thank you, DJ.
Thank you, Bridgitte. Thank you, everyone. Bye.